This is the podcast of ENCACT, the European Network on Cultural Management and Policy. In this series, we interview extraordinary professionals from the cultural management and policy community. Join us to hear their stories, the secrets of their success, and their advice for creating innovation by inspiring new policies and practices in the cultural, education, and research sector.
A big welcome to all of our listeners around the world to the ENCATC Academy podcast series. I'm Pravali Bangeti, the Policy and Communications Officer at ENCATC, and this podcast is part of a special series in which we talk with inspiring leaders committed to contributing to the sustainability of the cultural and creative sectors. This series of podcasts is being registered in the framework of the ENCATC Academy on Sustainable Cultural Management and Policy, which took place in April 2024 in Lille, France. These conversations with cultural leaders are meant to inspire current and future generations of practitioners in developing new sustainable practices and policies. So join us as we go on to this journey. In this podcast, we're joined by Dea Vidović, the director of Kultura Nova Foundation, which is a Croatian public foundation dedicated to advancing contemporary arts and culture within civil society. Dea has over 15 years of dedicated research experience in cultural policies and the integral role of cultural and creative instruments in sustainable development. Over these years, she has worn many hats in the sector, including those of a cultural manager, a policymaker, a journalist, an editor, a researcher, and a trainer in cultural management and policy. Having sat on both sides of the table, Dea has excellent insights on how funders look at sustainability in the cultural and creative industries and what prompts them to fund one project over the other. And it is this very topic that she will elaborate further upon during the podcast.
Welcome to the podcast in which we will focus on funders' approach to the sustainability of culture and creative sector. My name is Dea Vidović, and I will introduce you during this podcast the Eco Arts Nexus Repository, a project developed by Philea Arts and Culture Funders Forum with the support of Carasso and Kultura Nova Foundation. This online platform showcases a diverse range of examples of intersections between arts, culture, and environment, and it offers various resources, including funding for cultural adaptations, arts practices that address climate change and environmental urgencies, different kinds of the tools and the guidelines, literature, including report and the studies, different papers and the books, awards, various initiatives, and so on. The repository also highlights the projects and organizations that dedicated to hold their work and foster the connections between arts, culture, and the environment. The purpose of the repository is of creating informative tool that basically help to navigate all these different practices and examples that I briefly mentioned, and also to centralize the data access, because we've recognized different examples and practices that are so fragmented around, and we wanted to gather all that data, centralized data, and simplifying the access to data about arts, culture, and environment. When it comes to the goals, we recognize two main aspects. One is enhancing visibility of different practices that can help in elevating awareness of the current practices and examples in arts, culture, and environment. On the other side, or in a link with this, is basically encourage progress, inspire and motivate positive change, and advancement in sustainable and culturally enriched future. Currently, the repository is organized into approximately 15 different categories: policy, foundations policies, document, funding cultural adaptations, funding arts and the environment, capacity building for cultural adaptations, guidelines, tools, study and reports, and so on and so on, and features around 300 different examples, 300 different items. Repository represent online platform which is open and flexible, which means basically that this is a work in progress, evolving project, and this is the reason why I invite everyone who are active in these fields and areas to share and present their practices in Eco Arts Nexus repository. In next several minutes, I will try to briefly present just several examples in some of the categories. And one of the first which I want to start is the policy in general. So how funding bodies and different philanthropy institutions or cultural organizations can approach and create the policy related arts, environment, or philanthropy and environment. One of the first examples is the International Philanthropy Commitment on Climate Change that is introduced in 2021 by Google Network Links and the European Philanthropy Coalition for Climate. Currently, it has 769 signatures. This commitment consists of 7 actions: education and learning, commitment of resources, integration, endowments and assets that are really relevant for the philanthropy sector. Then, of course, operation, influencing and advocacy, and finally, transparency when it comes to the different practices and the policy within the philanthropy. The second example is more related to arts and cultural sector, and this is a Green Arts Charter that is introduced in 2023 by the Green Art Initiatives and the Creative Carbon Scotland. The signatures of this charter are cultural organizations that pledge to reduce emission and adapt to the impacts of climate change, inspire communities, and collaborate with others in delivering climate actions, advocate for climate actions, and finally embed the climate justice in their organizations and all their climate and artistic actions that is related to environment. The third example that I want to share with you is the book produced and published by Bookman Foundation in 2022. It's towards sustainability arts, sustainable arts, European best practices and a policy. This book is bringing best practices and policy of 7 geographical areas: Czech Republic, Finland, Flanders, Germany, Netherlands, Scotland, and Spain, with the aim to explore how cultural organizations are becoming more sustainable, how artists engage with the climate crisis, and finally to explore which role culture has in the general transition towards more and greener society. The second category that I want to share with you and that we included in the repository is example of different foundations policy. You can see in this table that I prepare and present here that the different foundations approach to their own policy in a different way, but majority of them articulate their relations and their policy regarding the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and the United Nations Agenda 2030. Some of foundation articulate precisely their actions, such as the Fundación Princesa de Asturias that mentioned net zero emission and list different and concrete actions in regarding materials, paper, transport, computers, plastic, digitalization, energy, local products, and so on. Some of the foundation publish annual report in which they inform public, but also different stakeholders about their actions in the context of the climate change. I also want to share one concrete example of Kultura Nova, where I work as a director. We have environmental sustainability policy, which is divided in several chapters, each of them targeting some specific topic, starting from the governance aspect of how Kultura Nova address environmental sustainability policy within the governing bodies. Then we included a chapter of rising awareness and what and how Kultura Nova contribute to this aspect. The fields of our sustainable actions are divided in several categories, including energy, food and water, waste management, paper materials and equipment, and procurement. We have a separate chapter dedicated to digital technology and communication. Our sustainable business system is divided in three different areas of our work. One is our office, the second one is our traveling, and the third one, our events, since Kultura Nova also organized a different kind of the gatherings, conference, seminars, study visits, and so on. Then we dedicated one chapter to our portfolio of organizations, in which we basically briefly describe our policy when it comes to Nova beneficiaries, how we support them, and in which way. And finally, the final chapter is measurement and reporting. So, what we measure and how we basically report. The next category is a funding cultural adaptation, which means providing different monetary and non-monetary support to cultural organizations, institutions, theater, galleries, museums, artists, individuals, artistic collective to transform their own operational and the program actions towards more carbon neutral and more sustainable. There is a different examples. I choose to share just several during this podcast. One of that is a non-monetary support of the Nina Carasso Foundations that is started to provide since 2022. It's a basically tailor-made capacity building program for individual and collective, providing legal and financial advice, support in governance, then also support for defining and articulate different objectives and actions, and also to create the impact assessment. Everything is based on the concept of theory of change. Another example is coming from Germany, from German Federal Cultural Foundations. It is also non-monetary support implemented in a period of 2021. The topic is the carbon footprints, through which basically this is the program that provides support to 19 cultural institutions working in diverse sectors that took part in creating a climate balance sheet and assessing their carbon footprint. And basically, this is the program that shaped carbon zero transformation process of those institutions that participated in the program. Another example is very relevant, very important, and probably one of the first of that kind. It's an environmental program of Art Council of England. The public funding body that I see as a pioneering is this field. So this is the monetary, non-monetary program developed since 2012. Targeting national portfolio organization of Arts Council England, their investment principles support organizations, but also the broader creative and cultural sector. The program includes two main strands, let's say. One is a board environmental champions, and another one is a leading resilience program that have different models. One is a free carbon calculator, then regular training events and the workshops for different organizations, then providing multimedia resources on climate justice and library, guidance tailored for individual practitioners, and annual report featuring benchmarking information use and the case studies of, let's say, best practices that is developed over the years in a context of England. All of that wouldn't be possible without partnership and a really great support of Julie Bicycle, which is one of the pioneering nonprofit organizations that started to develop a link between arts, culture, and environment. Yet another examples come from France. Fondation de France would implement since 2022 non-monetary consultation support, which is fully tailored to each organization's needs when it comes to the duration of the program, specific focus area, and actions. And this consultation program is developed in a partnership and collaboration between Fondation de France and the National Union of Environmental Initiatives. And one more current example that is started to implement in 2022 with the aim to provide 8 million euros till 2027 is implemented by German Federal Cultural Foundation on the national scale through 3 modules. One is providing support for the Fund Zero open-ended projects. The second one is providing training and qualifications through the program Academia Zero. And the third module is dedicated to creating a regional network for the meetings, for the knowledge exchange and sharing among all participating institutions and organizations in this program. The next category that I will briefly present here is funding arts practices that address environmental urgencies and climate change, that basically help and support and contribute to the increasing of public awareness about the climate and environmental crisis. There is plenty of examples, of course. I choose just several to provide overview and to show the diversity of different approach. One is provide support primarily to women and artists, female artists. It's a monetary support up to $20,000 that address different topics, including regeneration, eco-social engagement, recycling, decolonization, decarbonization, bioplastic, clean energy productions, and so on. Another example is coming from Europe, from Allianz Foundation, that is developed in 2023 for Europe and the Mediterranean region. It's a monetary support up to €50,000, address artists, cultural workers, activists, scientists, startups, and urban planners, environmental protection sectors, NGOs, to basically address challenges of climate change, to encourage transformative shift in cultural practices and the paradigms, to encourage visionary projects such as the sustainable rural mobility, coexistence of people, animals, and the plant, and also to foster transformational initiatives that embrace experimentation and openness and sometimes forward-looking perspective. Fundación Daniel and Nina Carasso from France and Spain that I mentioned already also provide support in this category, starting in 2023 with the monetary support for the projects up to 3 years that will bring together different stakeholders from different areas, including, of course, arts and the science, but also different educational institutions, citizens groups, foundations, and also local authorities, starting from the position that arts and environment both very transversal area that it's really depend on bringing different perspectives to the table. The aim of this program is to foster artistic endeavors that bridge multiple domains of research and the practices encompassing scientific, empirical, and the cultural dimension. Yet another example in Europe is a Culture of Solidarity Fund, Just Transition, that target basically the whole Europe and provide monetary support between 10,000 and 30,000 euro. It was implemented in 2023, but hopefully we can expect the next edition. This program, developed by European Cultural Foundation, is dedicated to culture and arts organizations, community, media, activists, and creative sectors. And the main goal of the program is to address critical themes of just transition and environmental sustainability, but from the perspective of arts and culture. Then also to encourage transnational and translocal collaboration, which is very relevant and important from the perspective of ECF and this kind of the cultivating cross-border solidarity alliance that is supported by European Cultural Foundations for decades already. And finally, also to promote just transition through public awareness, different kind of the democratic decision-making and creative ecosystem solution. Here is also a specific program, monetary, that is developed by Vidovic Foundation in Denmark, providing support since 2019 between 5 and 15 million Danish krona for civic associations, citizens, private and public groups, neighbors, designers, architectures, constructions, builder organizations, municipality, and different other stakeholders to develop projects that bring more daily light and fresh air into everyday life. And one of final examples include Bauhaus on the Sea Sails, which is a program of the Gulbenkian Foundation in collaboration with the Lisbon municipality. In Portugal, it's a monetary support for a different artistic residency program in 2024 that address topics such as sustainability, global food system, urban environment, and it's primarily for artists, designers, architecture, but also targeting scientists and the local community. Although I just share several examples with you of different practices, primarily in supporting and providing the monetary and non-monetary support, but also based on some overview, we can say that there is some positive, but also some negative key points that we can identify. At one point, we can see that there is a variety of approaches that contribute to cultural sector resilience. And the successful funding strategies, both internal and external flexibility of different funding bodies, basically ensures sustain and relevance of the cultural sector. But while exceptional funding initiatives really exist, and I present some of them, there is still a lack of standardized, sustainable models that basically indicate a need for systemic restructuring to better support cultural and creative sector. Despite the progress, we can also recognize insufficient research that highlight the need for increased, basically, the investment. The absence of a coherent and structural approach to grant making further compounds the challenges and hindering equitable distribution and maximizing impact within the cultural and creative sector. And finally, within all of that examples, but in many others, I recognize the absence of a creative climate justice approach that basically underscores the need, the necessity, or the urgency of accessible, flexible, and fair funding practices that should be developed in the future. So taking into account all these key points, some positives and some others negatives, I think that is really crucial for overcoming some of the current challenges and basically to maximize the impact of cultural and creative sectors in the context of environment and the climate crisis. So thank you so much for your attention and your interest. please consult the repository ECOArts Nexus. And in the case that your practices and your specific examples still not part of the ECOArts Nexus, please share with us, and different examples can be a part of the repository.
You have been listening to the podcast of ENCACT, the European Network on Cultural Management and Policy. To learn more about us, our activities, and how to become a member, visit encact.org.